Okay, so he was born today. I mean, on June 22nd, just as Gordon Matta-Clark was. Uh, well, considering the haircut of Alejandro Aravena, you might say that he was and is a bad boy, a rebellious architect, even in what he says sometimes. But he's paradoxical because these usually bad boys, genuine bad boys, are in conflict with society, and society punishes them for being so-called bad. But in the case of Alejandro, he was significantly embraced by society at the highest level. And his successes are almost, you know, I almost said embarrassing because it's, you know, most people struggle so much to arrive at a certain level of recognition, but not Alejandro Aravena. He just went on very quickly from teaching at Harvard and, being in the jury of the Pritzker Prize and then getting the Pritzker Prize and then being the director of the Venice Biennial. Everything works for this man. Although initially, from what I understood, he was discussed by architecture. Turn off the microphone. There is a noise, an annoying noise in the background. Thank you. Initially, from what I understood, after he finished his studies, he tried to do architecture and he had banal commissions for bars and so on. But paradoxically, he gave up architecture in order to open himself a bar. So, you know, I wonder, was he truly disgusted with what is called the bar culture? But then if he was, why did he open a bar to make a living, so to speak? Anyway, all in all, he is a tremendous example of an auspicious fate that sometimes, looks very favorably towards the architect. Here he is. And in my opinion, and my doubts about him are, start from a rather superficial so-called detail, his haircut. I think his haircut is intentionally made to look wild. And this makes me suspicious of this man, because I think genuine inner turmoil or inner volcano doesn't need a volcanic or tumultuous haircut. It is true that there are famous examples, predecessors like Einstein, but I don't think. I like to hope that Einstein was not looking in the mirror in the morning to stir up the volcano of his hair. But I might be subjective. Maybe this is the natural way his hair grows. I don't know. I wish. It's also true that I could be accused of envy because I have a very different haircut, so to speak. That's because I don't have a lot of hair to cut to begin with. Anyway, you would say this is superficiality. It's possible, but there are other things, and I am going to go through them. On the other hand, this man has genuine qualities, but it is something about him that makes me wonder. You look at this man and you say he's a South American revolutionary. But this man arrived at teaching at Harvard when he was, rather young, 30 something. So I wonder, if you look at this man, who is a good-looking man, in my opinion, he looks like an actor, not like a professor at Harvard University. But you know, maybe this is a conventional way of looking at things. That is the way I look at them. It's possible. On the other hand, he draws very, very well. And my renewed interest in Aravena came when I looked at his contribution to the Venice Biennial in 2018. And you are going to see a few images of that. I was impressed by the simplicity and the elegance and the low cost of what he did. When most people at the Venice Biennial get wild, in the sense of, you know, they squander large amounts of money to make a point, he made a point in a very modest way, and I like that very much. Anyway, here is the man with a beard, and he with a certain smile on his face, and of course the smile is very justified, because while better known architects, you know, like Peter Eisenman or Bernard Tschumi or Wolf Prix didn't get the Pritzker and probably never will, he got it when he was very young. But what surprised me is when I read in his acceptance speech that he was immensely surprised, he was shocked that he got it. I wonder why he was so shocked, because previously he was a member of the jury, of the Pritzker jury. So, and it's kind of known that that is, you know, part of the process towards getting it. Plus, who made the application for him, or who sent the portfolio there? And I don't know. It's something about him that makes me a little bit questioning. And I will end the presentation with an underlining of this thought I have relating to what he exhibits at the Venice Biennial this year. Here he is as a curator of architecture in Venice. I mean, this man is able to function at the highest level, and in a you know, apparently, at least apparently, in an unconventional way. And I wonder how he succeeds in doing this, because I tried all my life to do this and it doesn't work. For me, it didn't work. But for him, it seems he can get even the Nobel of Architecture, that is the Pritzker, with his wild, turbulent haircut. Here he is receiving the famous prize. And now we go through some drawings. But before we go through some drawings, this is the, you know, this is where he studied, you know, the Universidad Católica de Chile. And it's kind of interesting that, you know, a Catholic university is generating, you know, unconventional practices in architecture. For example, Amereida, Ciudad Abierta, also in Chile, is also sponsored by this, I would say, unusual Catholic university, which promotes, in a way, you know, the avant-garde. I'm not saying that Aravena is truly an avant-garde architect, but he has elements of what might be considered so. So Alejandro Gaston Aravena Mori is a Chilean architect, you see, born June 22nd, and executive. Now, I don't like this, executive director, but that's not because of him. Somebody wrote this on Wikipedia, but I'm a little bit tired of seeing this wording, you know, very businesslike and cold and almost frighteningly so. Executive director, you know, would you call Frank Lloyd Wright the executive director at Aviation and West, or would you call Le Corbusier the executive director of the Atelier in Rue de Sèvres? I don't think so. But this is the age we live in, you know, high capitalism, where whoever you know, does certain things at a certain level is considered an executive director. Anyway, he won the Pritzker in 2016, and he was the director and curator of the architecture section of the 2016 Venice Biennial. Some drawings. He draws a lot, and he draws very well. maybe too well, a little bit. Not particularly this drawing. I don't think this drawing is, truly, illustrating what I just said. But there are other sketches which show a certain sensitivity and, skill in manual drawing, hand drawing. Sorry for the resolution. Some of the pictures are not as large as I would have liked. I think he combines well le mot et les images, or les mots et l'image, and as tools towards what might be called conceptual, drawing. What I like about Aravena is his concern also because, at the level he operates, he could have forgotten about the poor people, but he also has social concerns. And he, even with his firm Elemental, he started the practice of, creating social housing very, very affordable in Chile. And I like this. I think it's, this dimension of being an architect, to assume social realities and fight for equality and justice and so on, it's very necessary. After all, do some of the stars of today, do they do this? Well, not so much. I mean, how many social housing schemes do you know by Rem Koolhaas or Frank Gehry or Zaha, for that matter? But Aravena, in a different country, he assumes that side of life, and I think he is to be applauded for this. Although what architecturally he did in this sense was not very graceful, I think, and we'll arrive at that. But the fact that he operates also in the field of high art, so to speak, and in the field of social, social work, actually, is a positive thing. And I think our time, if it assumes the ethos of social concerns, social work, just as it happened at the beginning of modernity, at the beginning of the 20th century, would be great. I think we need stars, so to speak, to understand that there are many people who need basic things, and the architect could help to provide them. From what I understood, he came from rather modest, beginnings. His parents were school teachers, and he claimed that it was very difficult to go to the university in Santiago de Chile, having not sufficient money. But what amazes me is how quickly he arrived at the highest level of recognition, having no support. It's almost a phenomenon. I don't know if there is another one like him in the constellation of high altitude architectural practices. Here he is. He has a study. I'm sorry, where he cut bricks. And I like this, it is as if he wanted to go beyond appearance, beyond the shiny side of the brick, and underline its core, which is less glittering, but perhaps more true. And this concern for the earth, for the bricks, is, I think, a positive one. And it might be what differentiates him from other so-called star architects. Here is, unfortunately, the resolution is not great, but this is a wall he envisioned with cut or broken, I should actually say broken bricks. Now they might, function a little bit in a more vulnerable way than those which are not broken, but for the aesthetical value, and even for the, as possible provocations towards thinking about a world which is not so self-assured as so many worlds claim to be. It is a vulnerable world, but in a way, it's more true than those which appear to be less vulnerable. A house for a sculptor. That's how he started. I understood he was disappointed with architecture, doing architecture after he finished his studies. And for a few years, I think he ran a bar. And then a friend or an acquaintance asked him to build a house for her, a woman, a lady, a sculptor. And I think he did a very good job. And he was 30 years old. This is the house. And in my opinion, is one of his best buildings. It's raw and it's elemental, and in this he was true to his vision about his practice. I understood he asked the client not to pay him, but to allow him total freedom to do whatever he wanted to do. And apparently this is what he arrived at this building. I think we need more architects like this, who at least at the beginning would say, don't pay me, but allow me to express myself as well as I can, without impositions, without restrictions. Don't pay me. At least this is what he declared, but I don't know. Anyway, it's a good building. It has rectangular parts, but I think it's convincing, and it is announcing his later work. And I like the fact that it doesn't have makeup, it doesn't have finishes. It has raw walls. You see the brick, you see the concrete, just as they were put into work. And there is a level of, sincerity, I would say here, which I admire. But of course, not everybody, not every client would accept such a building. He was lucky that it was an artist who so-called commissioned him to do this building. So this was the first house he built when he was 30, and then later on, everything seemed to run quite smoothly for him. It's not really very, as opposed to other star architects, he is, operating or working within he's using an architectural language which is not shockingly new. Now, this is a different kind of house, and intentionally I placed these two houses in proximity. This is an opulent house that he did later, and you can see the evolution in a way. This is a house that did have a generous budget, and I imagine he was paid for it. There is a difference between this house and so many contemporary houses. Maybe a certain darkness, or the fact that he uses organic materials, like the stones, and also the setting, of course, is not that it is unusual, but the landscape of Chile has a beauty that maybe not too many landscapes in the world still have, especially in the so-called developed world. And certainly you are not going to see very often a horse in the vicinity of a house in the developed, so-called developed world. I like to compare sometimes houses with a paradigmatic Villa Savoie. Well, here we see a house that is not elevated from the earth on pilotis, is not white. I'm not even mentioning the horse. You know, I mean, Le Corbusier thought of a different kind of horse, the car. But here is a house that still believes somehow in the earth. And as such, it has to be saluted, I think, in positive terms. It's a good house, I think. He's a skilled architect. He's a skilled designer. And I personally don't think he needs too much tumultuousness in his haircut. You know, the tumultuousness has to express itself in the work you do, and I think he's capable of doing that. And I like his choice of materials. You know, he's not saying no to the natural world, to the natural materials, to the organic world. It's also interesting, and you are going to see in the plans that he has two systems, so to speak. On the first floor, on the ground floor, it is a rectangular prism, and on the top is something else. As also there is a duality between the inside and the outside, and this actually might be a little bit problematic, so to speak, because, for example, now to compare it with another paradigmatic building of modernity, Falling Water, there is no contradiction between the outside of the building and the inside. Here, there is. You saw the outside and you see the inside. The inside has no bricks or stones. It's conventionally and conveniently white. Maybe too conveniently. On the other hand, when you think about the realities of Chile, where many people are rather poor, I wonder how a socially concerned architect like him felt when he designed such an opulent villa. You know, I understand there are contradictions in the functioning of an architect in the world, but I wonder if these contradictions cannot be solved without these dramatic dichotomies. So the interior is rather bourgeois and predictable. But you see, the two systems is the rectangular prism on the first floor, and then on the top, there is a different kind of architecture in a way. And it's kind of interesting. The living spaces are at the top, and the bedrooms are at the bottom. You see, he has a large master bedroom here too, but the other bedrooms are on the first floor. On the first floor, yes, well, the ground floor, if you want to call it so. Here it is. So the cars and the bedrooms, they are within the rectangular prism. 3 cars. And we still wonder about pollution, right? The pollution of the world. You know, and I will end the presentation with showing his contribution to the Venice Biennial this year. And there I also have some question marks, because he seems to be very concerned with the correct questions relating to our time. You know, social discrepancies, you know, diminishing resources, ecology, the climate change, and all the rest. But his activity is not actually, doesn't seem to act perfectly in accordance with his concerns, and you'll understand when we arrive at that participation this year at the Venice Biennial. But this is all in all, it's a good house. If I had some question marks, as I call them, is because of this, in a way, fracture, this junction between the way the building shows itself towards the outside and the way it is inside. Because it is known that most modern architects try to create a continuum between the interior and the exterior. Here, the interior is, you saw it, very white and bourgeois and comfortable and predictable. And the exterior, without being really provocative or unconventional, showed something else. Now, we arrive at a different work, office tower, actually 2 towers. Well, 1 tower that becomes 2. And maybe this says something about his own dualities, if not dichotomies. The Siamese towers, a workshop building at the School of Architecture and faculty buildings at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile. Again, it is amazing. He received these commissions, being rather young, and I'm sure there are architects in Chile, older than him who didn't get it. So the university asked us, he wrote, to question the type of architecture required for teaching now that everything depends on digital technology. Should architecture change now that we have computers? Does the notion of a room, be it for work or for attending a class, still make sense? Our answer was, of course, yes and no. Yes, I have a few more questions. Maybe I could have placed this picture later. Anyway, I continue with the text. Yes, because the paradigm of working spaces has been reversed. If until now a good room was the one that had a good natural light, library, classroom, etc., now that we work on screens, a good space is the one that has achieved a good half light to avoid uncomfortable reflections. This fact led us to explore a relatively hermetic volume with very controlled perforations towards the outside. But on the other hand, we were not that optimistic regarding computers and their influence in education or the transmission of knowledge. In the end, nothing will defeat a good conversation of 2 persons, be it between a professor and a student or between students, under a good shadow, drinking a nice cup of coffee or having a casual conversation in a corridor. In a way, formal education is taken care by building codes, light, acoustics, ventilation, but nobody takes care of informal education. And there we saw a design opportunity. I totally agree. This informal education is extremely important. What happened outside of the classroom, what happens outside of the, the requirements of the curriculum. Very, very important. And unfortunately, most schools neglect that so-called informal education. Here he shows his so-called rebellious side. So instead of moving forward, thinking about the next step in education, we thought we had to move back as much as possible to more archaic and primitive ways of being. Now, the building doesn't look too primitive, but I like his concern. I like the fact that he understood that, one has also to look back, not just to look forward. The building, again, his interiors are not as perhaps as interesting as the outside. Again, he can be a little bit puzzling because usually, at least until a few years ago, the star architects built a very provocative architecture, aesthetically speaking. His work is moderately so. And this could also actually be seen as a quality and not as a deficiency. So what he did here, I read about this building. They wanted to have a tower, but there wasn't enough, space for that to create a convincing tower, and that's why he started with a building which could have been chubby, as he put it, and he split it at the top to become two buildings, thus slender. But this might say something also about his, maybe the so-called Siamese towers existed and exist within himself psychologically, maybe. So you see, he begins with a single building and then he splits it at the top. This man who studied architecture in Santiago de Chile also studied for a year in Venice, at the University of Venice, the theory of architecture and fine arts. And I think he had a good choice. He understood that it's important for an architect to have some knowledge and training in the field of theory and in the field of fine arts. It helps. That's why I don't quite understand why many schools of architecture do not also teach history of art, because art would certainly benefit the education of an architect. Now he has two skins here, and there is a text, you can find it on the web, about the energy issues being addressed in a better way, having two skins. This is the justification of what he did in terms of the response of the building in relating to the energy consumption, but I also think this was also a choice that had justifications having to do also with aesthetics. It's a good building, I think, or should I say, they are good buildings. It's both. It's two in one. The Siamese towers. Now, this is a college that is maybe less interesting architecturally. I think there are several buildings here. He did several buildings for educational programs. One in Texas, which you are going to see. The UC Faculty of Mathematics, maybe it's the University of Chile or the Catholic University, I don't know what the UC stands for. The Faculty of Mathematics in Santiago. Now, this is the university campus he worked for in Texas. in the United States, of course, for St. Edward's University. And he built dorms for the students and the dining hall. Interesting the way he insinuates in some of his works the process of becoming, intentionally these species were, apparently left like this, showing the fragility of the building process. And of course, they are rhetorically there, but still says something about that the process counts too, and it's not just the final so-called object that matters. And there is a level of instability which is to be acknowledged and recognized. Otherwise, I don't know, you look at this facade of the building, is rather stern and blunt, almost, and stable. Now, in this case, is the opposite to what we saw in that house, the second house I showed. Here, the exterior is rather, mono, so to speak, but the interior has color. And that there is more transparency. And of course, it's not the same building actually, but it's in the same complex of buildings. The beautiful disorder of life. Well, maybe not so beautiful, but certainly disorder. But this is how, student life is, and maybe not only student life. Let's acknowledge it. The buildings towards the outside are different. The buildings towards the outside are, not truly acknowledging the disorder within. What can you do? Discrepancies and dualities. Well, GAN is the horizontal window, continuous window that a certain part of modernity advocated so with so much ardor. Here are vertical, narrow windows. So not all modernity, well, maybe even Le Corbusier himself would not have continued to promote with so much insistence his horizontal continuous window. But the interior is rather banal. The exterior, I don't know what to say. It's fine, I guess, but it's not an alarmingly interesting complex of buildings, I would say. Could something interesting be alarmingly so? I guess so, but I don't know. Should we promote alarmingly interesting buildings? Maybe not, maybe yes. If we are to live dangerously, but between, the desideratum to live dangerously and the actuality, the actuality of living is a long distance. Anyway, this is a fortress-like building to an extent, and this is what he built in the United States. the campus, the campus life being rather different from the so-called real life of you know, living outside of the campus. I love the way he has a continuous preoccupation for the tactility of the wall. We saw that fragment for that experiment with the broken bricks, and I think this is needed in architecture to make walls in such a way that they invite our caresses, just like this wall seems to be able to do. Because the wall like this has a sensitivity, it has a you know, and it's also the monolithical reality of the world is problematized by the fragmentation of the little pieces that is made from, even if this might be just you know, the fascia, the skin of the wall. It's still, I think, important to make the wall vibrate, almost impressionistically so. But on the other hand, we see here a different kind of aesthetics, you know, slick and using different materials. So again, we see some kind of a dichotomy almost between the interior and the exterior. So Alejandro Aravena in Texas, in the United States. Now we look at an interesting work, a cultural center in Constitucion, is a city in Chile. And is, I mean, this work might have been admired even in Portugal because of its, you know, rational, rhythmical, equidistant kind of you know, architecture. It's a good building, I would say, and it appears to be simplistic, but it's not. I don't know very well what these spikes are for. They worry me a little bit. They are not very gentle. I mean, why are they here? I wonder, maybe someone has an idea about this. But I like the structure of the building, and these diagonals also shows that he's not dogmatic about you know, combining steel with wood and you know, various forms of addressing the building.
May I interact?
Pardon?
May I interact?
Please.
I'm thinking that these bolts are there for the same reason that he's showing the metal structure. Like probably behind the wood there is like metal joints between the beams going diagonally, and perhaps that's why they show.
I don't know. I'm not so convinced because they are, you know, aggressive, and you know, I mean, I don't know. There is something there which bothers me a little bit. You know, is it so you cannot sit and be with your back against the vertical element, or they seem to be aggressive, and in a way, I mean, this could have been avoided, you know. I don't know. This is my opinion, that there is a level of aggressivity here which I do not comprehend.
If I may comment, I believe throughout America, it's fairly common for public spaces to have spikes to prevent homeless people from sleeping there. So this might be the reason.
Well, I thought of this, but we are dealing here with an architect who loudly seems to advocate exactly the cause of the homeless and the disadvantaged. So how do we conciliate those social concerns with the aggressivity of what he proposed and built here? You know, I mean, if you care for the homeless, how could you do something like this? I couldn't do something like this. If I care for the homeless, I would refuse to do this kind of thing. This is indeed, and you are correct. There are buildings where you know, the designers and the clients decided to use certain devices to discourage the so-called homeless people to, you know, find an abode in their quarters. But this to me is in total contradiction with what the man seems to stand for. And I'm still puzzled. I still don't know why these things are there, so obvious and so disturbing, really. I mean, I almost feel like stopping the presentation at this point. I dislike this very much. If indeed that's why these things are there, I almost feel like saying, no, I am not going to, I know I'm saying something radical. I'm not going to wish you happy birthday, because you don't do something like this towards another human being who is less privileged than you are. You just can't do this. And this is supposed to be a cultural center, no? I mean, no, really. The more I look at these things, the more I feel like stopping the presentation right now. That's why I said from the beginning, I have my ambivalence about this man. There are things I admire about him, but there are things that make me question if he's indeed as honest as he claims he is. And you'll see the last work he did for the Venice Biennial this year. And that in that work, he also contradicts himself in a rather disappointing way. Anyway, moving forward, we'll continue with the presentation, even if, yes, I am disappointed. If the function of those spikes is this one, that I am very disappointed of Mr. Aravena. I only hope the Catholic University doesn't teach this sort of thing, you know. It's amazing to me, the adversity that still exists. And rhetorically, his last piece at the Venice Biennial this year seems to be about togetherness, about meeting each other halfway and so on. What kind of a meeting each other halfway is this? Where you provide aggressive spikes so you cannot allow the other side to even sit there, you know, and you know, find some kind of a solace in the vertical, you know, piece there. Anyway, the Center of Innovation in Santiago de Chile, a dramatic building, a dramatic box. It is a box, and it is rhetorically dramatic. What can I say? It's a good building, I guess. It has an urban scale, these large openings. You see the size of a human being, and then these huge openings. He handles them well, but at bottom, he's still a rationalist, I would say. And this is shown dramatically in his proposals and for actually built work for you know, disadvantaged housing complexes in Chile. We are going to see them. If I have, I mean, not, I already mentioned my reticence vis-a-vis him, but all in all, his work shows, in a strange way, perhaps, he's not truly a free man. He's not truly, he says he fights for equality, for freedom, and so on. But his architecture is especially in his later works, rather strict and not in the noble sense of the word. I see a certain, yes, rigidity there. I don't know if I express myself well now, but all in all, I think Aravena is at bottom a rationalist, even when he uses curves or even the circle, like you'll see in his contribution to the Venice Biennial this year. Again, the tension between the outside and the inside. There are two different systems, so to speak, to an extent at least. Many people were very puzzled when he received the Pritzker Prize, because there were at that time, there still are significant architects who didn't get it and will not get it. And he got it. And you know, you wonder sometimes, you know, this prize is offered, is considered maybe justifiably so, that is the Nobel Prize in Architecture, whatever that means. But is this the best the architecture has to offer or had to offer in 2016? He is a skilled designer. Yes, he is a skilled architect, but you know, there are many skilled designers and skilled architects. In essence, it is a cube. You know, he broke it here and there, but in essence, it is a cube. And this is, I would say, obvious. Villa Verde. Now here we arrive at the architect as a social worker. And I said it and I will say it again. I think bringing back to architecture concerns for social issues is very, very important. And this was the case at the beginning of modernity, at the beginning of the 20th century. There were architects who worked in this field. I think this dimension of being an architect today is one that shouldn't be ignored. But it is not easy to marry the artistic or the aesthetical side of architecture with the social concerns. And you will see an example right here in the so-called Villa Verde in the city of Constitucion. This is what he proposed. He proposed to give this house, this unit, to a family, and only half of it would be built by the, you know, whoever paid for it, the government or some institution, but leave the space, another half, for future developments. And as a thought, it's not a bad thought, but it's very rigid. I mean, you know, these are identical. I mean, how much freedom do you have against, you know, within this, you know, allocated so-called free space? The whole enterprise, even at the Venice Biennial, was called, you know, free space in 2018. I don't see too much freedom here. I'm sorry. I mean, yes, I'm glad I have the space to extend, but I'm very limited by the enclosure and even by the shape. this is not really freedom. This is, and it's even, it's not even a controlled freedom. It's an imposed. I mean, the limitations are drastic. You know, or what if I don't want the roof to be like this, or what I want if I want to have a terrace, or what? I mean, you know, and again, this shows his dual personalities. I would say his schismatic personality. Even this house is schismatic. You know, it's cut in two, and there are two halves, one built, the other one not yet built. But you'll see that the poor people living there, they try to develop, but the development is problematic. You know, like here. You know, so would you call this freedom of expression or freedom? Yes, you amplified your space, but very mechanically. You know, literally, it's mechanical growth. It's freedom goes beyond subtraction and addition, beyond you know, calculations. Again, he's a rationalist. This man is a rationalist. Reason is needed, of course, but I think architecture, to achieve its poetry, should move beyond the strictness and the predictability of the calculating mind of the rationalist. Look, the exasperation of, you know, being is like being free in a cell, within a cell. You know, it's not true freedom. I'm not saying it's easy to provide freedom for everybody. It's not. But this is only apparently honoring the less privileged with a higher degree of freedom. It's not. It's still based on calculation. You know, okay, I doubled the space, but I'm still unfree. Maybe that's why the whole enterprise, the whole project is called controversial. I don't know, but it is something impure about it, or simplistic. And you'll see a view from the top, from the air of this, because it's a large complex of buildings. It's rather sad. I came from a communist country. I knew what communism is, but this seems to be even worse than communism, because it gives the illusion of the private property, you know, but it's only an illusion. It's you know, the people living here are still confined. You know, they are given this, and you say they have a villa, but it's not a villa. You know, it's this carcass that is cut into two, and it is repeated many, many times. You'll see the plans. I understand that there was no money. I understand, and it's a noble attempt to try to do as much as you can with little money. This is noble and necessary, but maybe it could have been done in a more gentle way and in a less, you know, repetitive way. So here you see the plan with the, you know, development in the other half, so to speak, and the 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, and now with 4 bedrooms. But it's all calculative. It's all about, it's, you know, I don't think it has a lot of grace. But I'm also saying that in the field of working for social justice and doing social work, it's very difficult to bring that poetry that architecture should aspire towards. It is difficult, I know. But this doesn't mean we shouldn't long for it and attempt to achieve it. I like these things when they are during construction, because the rigidity of the conceptual thinking is not yet so stringently or strictly externalized. I almost feel like saying, if he left it like this, would have been better, and allow the people to then, you know, do their walls and their things. That they would have had more freedom. But then, you know, when you begin to have the architect go a little bit too far, we arrive at, you'll see now in the next page here. Now, I'm sorry, but this is like a concentration camp. You know, it's like, you know, the reservations in the United States for Native American Indians. These are barracks. These are not homes. I'm sorry, Mr. Aravena, but would you like to live in one of these things? I'm not sure you would. Would you? Again, mentally, at the level of the brain, I think he's correct. The social problems should be addressed. Social housing should be addressed. One should work in this field, but not in this way. I come from a communist country and I know what it means to live in a communist city, but this is worse actually, because it gives the illusion, at least there were, you know, collective buildings, apartment buildings. But here, you know, you have so-called individual homes that give the illusion that you have private property, but actually your private, so-called private property is repeating itself many, many times in identical forms. And this is disturbing. The house of writing. Now here it's not very clear to, when I saw this first, I said, wow, this was built by Aravena. I don't necessarily like the embroidered drama at the top, but it surprised me because I thought he would never do something like this. Well, it turns out he actually built only just a pavilion hanging from this. I don't think he did this so-called embroidered part here at the top. Even Dan Coma contributed with a piece here, but several architects, I imagine. I don't know who did this. Probably not Aravena. I couldn't find out. This is what he did. This rectangular box. Didn't I say that he is a rationalist? Well, it shows clearly here, not just in terms of form, but also in terms of atmosphere. So, you know, Dan Coma isn't the only big name to build for this foundation. In Switzerland, Pritzker Prize winner Aravena, by the way, Dan Coma didn't get it, was responsible for the elemental tree house, a glass cube, again, cube, that floats atop a hanging concrete slab. Rather than being a workspace for residents, the elemental tree house, I don't know exactly why it's called the tree house, is a cabin where writers and foundation staff can cook and share meals. Granite floors, a common kitchen, dining table, and the living room area lend the cabin a more communal feel. I actually find this interior extremely disturbing. It's very, I don't know, it's so, when you think that this is the house of writing, this is for writers, and when I look here, it's like almost the lobby of a banal hotel, you know, or I don't know. I imagine, I like to think that he didn't like it either. Maybe he was not responsible for the furnishings here, but they are pathetic, you know, in terms of colors and design, and the whole thing, I think, is a failure. This box, you know, hanging under the name of being a tree house from the structure. Here you see on the right a little bit of the house by Dan Coma. I didn't add too many pictures because when I found out that actually not the whole thing was done by Aravena, I stopped adding material. Anyway, this is a school from 2015. Here again, I think there is a level of rhetorics that bothers me. The intention is perhaps good to have a large space for outdoor activities for the children, but it's, I don't know, it's I would say almost depressing. Yes, it's large, it's the roundness of the circle above, but there is no vegetation, and it's a communality that worries me a little bit. This vastness, the design gesture towards, in a way, a vast building, if I can call it so. I mean, is it truly what we need towards more intimacy and more gentleness in our architecture? I don't think so. I think we need a different kind of architecture. This, yes, now I see they began to plan certain things. Maybe when this is filled with vegetation, it would look better. But still, this circle, which is clearly a will decision of the architect, bothers me because of its diameter, I mean, its size. And yes, I think it is rhetorical. Now, in 2018, and this is what renewed my interest in him. For a while, I didn't have an interest in Aravena, but after I saw his work at the Venice Biennial in 2018, which I like very much, but I like very much looking superficially at it. I like very much the way he presented his work. I didn't have time to read all the text there, and I think this is a problem with the biennial, with any biennial. I mean, we are talking about the architecture biennial. You truly need several weeks to study carefully everything that is there. It's impossible in one day to go with so much richness, with so much material. But I like very much the way he presented his work. And look at this. He wrote directly on the wall the value of what's not built, and maybe he should learn about that himself, the value of what's not built. Indeed, this connects with a deeper sense of what sustainability might be. You know, the way he, in essence, you had a string and then connected to the wall with tape, and then a folded piece of paper in half, hanging from the string. I thought was very elegant and very inexpensive, almost at no cost, and yet aesthetically, I think very pleasing. Yes, you have here some, iPads or whatever they are called, communicating digitalized images, but this is the part that didn't impress me at all. What impressed me was here, with a chalk to write on the wall, and then have the strings, and then some tape, and the papers with his own hand drawing and handwriting. I thought was very effective and impressive in the sense of how much you can do with very little, with very modest means. In fact, I would have taken off these things completely. You know, they were not needed. I thought was very, very elegant and inspired and even poetical. He worked together with a few other people. Here I read a little bit about this elemental strategy, sometimes acts as strategic, inventive thinker, and sometimes as active maker of finished buildings. In fact, he founded this do tank as opposed to think tank. So he is about doing. The work ranges from several incremental open system housing projects. We saw them. I don't think they are so open as he claims. To the sculpture, they are apparently open, but fundamentally they are very restrictive and very closed. They are closed systems, not open. I'm sorry, Mr. Aravena, but that cutting the house in two, building one half and leaving it open the other, doesn't mean it's a so-called open system. It's still fundamentally a closed system. To the sculptural clear form of the Innovation Center we saw the Innovation Center. In our manifesto, we suggested that free space, this is what his contribution to the Venice Biennial in 2018 was named, new ways of seeing the world, inventing solutions where architecture provides for the well-being and dignity of each citizen on this fragile earth. Yes, I agree, it sounds good, but from here to what he actually did in those housing complexes, I think, is a long distance. Aravena of Elemental continually campaigns for this cause, highlighting the need for architecture to deal with the enormous problem of providing open systems. You know, Mr. Aravena, with my brain, I agree with you, but with my heart, I do not agree with you. And I would eliminate the word system, because the word system is going against that openness that you seem to advocate. The word system is mechanical, and it's already an imposition on the openness that you want to achieve. But as I said, he is a rationalist, and that's why he uses the word system rather than finished objects. I would agree. The obsession with the building as an object is not a good one. I agree with him here. So as to house with dignity the growing population of the world and our cities. Okay, so he proposes that free space be used as a verb, a commandment for leaving unoccupied voids. Well, if those voids are so strictly delimited as you delimited them in that complex of buildings, I have some question marks. So as to capitalize on the spontaneous initiative of people to extend and build for themselves. What spontaneous? I mean, there was no room for spontaneity there. You know, you just give me a carcass of a building identical with the other carcasses on the campus, and you invite me to be spontaneous. It's like telling a bird to be free within its cage without opening the door to the cage. Impossible. So I can't really take totally seriously this man. Rationally, I agree with what he says, but in terms of more subtle issues, I have question marks. His call to leave free space as a public space reserve is laudable. He cites the proportion of private land to public space in developed countries as being 1-to-1, dropping to 1-to-10 in underdeveloped countries. Well, he also built those giant villas for the very rich. So there again, not to mention those spikes against the homeless at the bottom of those pillars in the building that we saw. His arguments are made through his own hand sketches and text as exhibited here in the biennial in 2018. Big ideas which cut to the chase are expressed simply and clearly and cannot be ignored. Again, the most that I liked, and I liked it very, very, very much, was the simplicity and the elegance and the low cost of his contribution. Like you see here, you know, so simple, but also so elegant, you know, some tape, the wire, the string, and then the papers he drew himself. This I like very much. I don't care for these things here. They were not necessary. It is my belief you can do a lot with very simple means and without great expenditures. And here is an example, and this is why I liked it. I think it's a brilliant idea to exhibit your thoughts in a most modest way, but also in a most efficient way, and in a way also in a most poetical way. I saw this. I was here in Venice at that time, and when I saw this, my interest in Aravena came to life. But it's true, I didn't read everything was written there. I would have needed at least 1 or 2 hours just to read what he did. And you know, the Venice Biennial has too many things to offer. And if you have just 1 day at your disposal, it's impossible. But some people read, as you can see. It was a good, I think, at least in terms of the way he displayed his ideas it was a very fine work, because he didn't try to impress aesthetically, but exactly because of it, I think he did in a very simple way. And I truly like this. Now, this year, and with this I end the presentation on Aravena, I have questions about this as well, and you'll see why. The name of the project is How Will We Live Together? Chileans and Mapuche. I don't know who Mapuche, I don't even know if I pronounce well. Maybe it's the indigenous population living there. Building places to get to know each other. This is noble. Building places to parley. I don't know what this is in the language of the indigenous people, I guess. Sounds good. Only connect, to live together. But look what he did. It's a monument, and it's a monument done with cut down trees at a time when we know the climate change is a reality and we need badly the trees. I only hope, but even without this, it is something very, very questionable in my opinion. But if these trunks of trees were brought here to Venice from Chile, this is not sustainable at all. I am sorry. The amount of energy spent in order to cut these impressive trees down in order to make a show in Venice, it's something very discouraging here, and I think we should fight against this sort of thing. This is hypocrisy. I'm sorry. You know, if you truly care for the homeless, you don't put spikes where you put them. If you care for nature, if you care for oxygen, if you care for trees, if you care for nature, leave them in peace. Don't cut them down and don't bring them here to create a monument dedicated to the so-called togetherness. This is really very rhetorical, and I would say very insincere. Yes, it's nice, but it's still a structure that, to me, although he uses the circle, it's rather rigid. Yes, the roundness gives the impression that it's not truly rationalistic, but it is a system. It is a system here in as much as in his rectangular structures. And again, I deplore cutting down the trees. I really do. This is not true sensitivity. This is not gentleness. This is not that making peace with the world, making peace with the earth, making peace with nature. It's not. It's still an assault and an imposition of nature, and a very alarming one. This man who claims he's announcing the future through his contributions to equality, to ecological concerns, actually did more damage to nature than most other architects. I didn't see the other pavilions and the other contributions, but truly my heart is aching looking at these cut down trees by Mr. Aravena in order to build this temporary monument to his own ego, I would say. You know, it's really, I mean, it is alarming. And this is happening all the time. You know, even Sir Norman Foster is saying he's building, energetically conscious buildings. Come on, Mr. Forster, let's be honest about it. Your office towers will not function without an immense technology that provides the air conditioning and so on. Technology cannot save us from technology. It's wrong to think in this way. Nor would cutting down trees the way Aravena did would save the oxygen of the planet. Nor would it realize that togetherness, because there is no gentleness here. It's because of the rigidity of the system. You know, it is rigid. It is imposing on us a form of togetherness with it, which is still restrictive, because it is not truly offering that free space. That free space he, through words, seems to advocate cannot be achieved through such, deterministic structures. I mean, of course, a lot of money was spent in order to build this and to cut down a significant amount of trees. And what trees, I truly think it's alarming. I don't trust this man. Now I go to a man who is much more fragile and much more unaccomplished, but in a way more genuine, and that is Gordon Matta-Clark, who was also born today, meaning on the 22nd of June. Gordon Matta-Clark, who unfortunately had luck and I know it sounds strange. How could you say unfortunately by having the luck of having a famous father? But I think he suffered because of the fame of his father. The important Chilean painter Matta, he was his son, and he had a brother who actually committed suicide young. And so I think there were troubles in that family. They were famous because of the father, but I think there were troubles. So Gordon Matta-Clark, born on June 22nd, was an American artist, best known for his site-specific artworks he made in the 1970s. He studied architecture. So Matta-Clark's parents were artists, Anna Clark, an American artist, and Roberto Matta, a Chilean surrealist painter of Basque, French, and Spanish descent. He was the godson of Marcel Duchamp's wife, Tini. His twin brother, Sebastian, also an artist, committed suicide in 1976. Well, Gordon Matta-Clark also died at 37, so young. He studied architecture at Cornell University from 1962 to 1968, so for 6 years, including a year at the Sorbonne in Paris, where he studied French literature. In 1971, he changed his name to Gordon Matta-Clark, adopting his mother's last name. He did not practice as a conventional architect. He worked on what he referred to as an-architecture. So he was an architect, just like Cedric Price. What is an-architecture? It could be interpreted in various ways, as a anti-architecture or anarchic architecture. All in all, he had a negative stance vis-a-vis architecture, and I could understand why. At the time of Matta-Clark's tenure there, Cornell's architecture program was guided in part by Colin Rowe, a preeminent architectural theorist of modernism. And I'll show now some of his drawings, almost all related more implicitly or explicitly to architecture. And I think they are very poetical. Some of them are rigorous, like here with the geometrical studies. He was an eclectic, in a way, artist. And maybe if he lived 30 years more, he would have produced who knows what. But because he died at 37, he still is a very important presence in the field of art and architecture. And I think students in architecture and architects and people interested in culture should know as much about him as possible. Because he was, although vulnerable and maybe troubled, he was an original thinker and an original doer. And somehow I appreciate more his contribution to architecture than to those highly accomplished and highly polished and highly rhetorical architects, or not necessarily architects. There is geometry. So again, the man studied architecture for 6 years, but he didn't practice it as a so-called conventional architect. You know, James Joyce wrote a beautiful book called The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Maybe another book could be written with the title Portrait of the Architect as a Rebellious Artist, Practitioner. Portrait of the Architect as a rebellious. What I mean by rebellious is someone who longs for more, who wants to change the world, who wants to transform society and himself. And I think we need such architects. not architects, not just architects, of course, but we are talking now about architecture and about architects. And sometimes this process of longing for another horizon of hope involves destruction, involves negativity, involves being iconoclastic. The quest for the new always involves certain degrees of negativity. Construction and destruction are closely associated. Now here you see, insinuations of the column, now the Greek column, drawn in a naive way, yes. But so this is a fragment of a building, the facade of a building, where the architect proposed, disrupting the existing order. And you'll see some examples of what he did. Like here, this is on this photograph, he envisioned cutting down what is seen here in order to, it's kind of interesting and paradoxical, it seems he wanted to ruin the building, but at the same time, there is a level of organization. These curves are drawn with will, are drawn with being aware of what he was doing. This is not accidental work. He was trying to recreate the building in a way. And in the act of ripping off the building, in the act of raping the building in a way, through geometry and through excavations, he actually rejuvenated the building, deconstructing reality. Gordon Matta-Clark. Look what he did at the interior. You don't even know what's going on here. Well, of course, here it is a collage of pictures, so it's more confusing than in actuality it was. But I understand, I think, what he was attempting. He tried to break the placid stability of the building and to create an event which would enliven the building, would make it alive again. These are excavations. These are cuts into the building. Some distant references perhaps can be seen without perhaps him being aware of it. But this kind of cuts into the building, these round cuts into the building, make me think a little bit of Louis Kahn. Of course, Louis Kahn was not, this idiosyncratic, rebellious young man, but these large round openings in the facade of a otherwise rectangular building do make me think a little bit of Kahn, because I think the presence of instability within a stable building is necessary. It's necessary because it insinuates becoming into the very flesh of being. And you need that becoming. He did this mostly by himself. I mean, he was held for larger scale works, if we are to call them works. In a way, they were anti-works, but done with a lot of effort. He worked with his own hands. And you see here, would you call these openings in the rectangular structure as being, just disturbing reality? No, I think they were recreating or creating a new reality. Yes, through erosions, but because they were based on geometry, these erosions showed the will to generate life, to create a new life. And this is what the artist does, and this is what the architect does, wants to create life, to make something alive. Paradoxical in this case, you might say. Of course, you could wonder how come he was allowed to attack, because he attacked these buildings. Well, he succeeded. I don't know. I guess these were abandoned buildings, and they became his canvas, so to speak. While a painter paints on canvas, Gordon Matta-Clark so-called painting, of course, painted in between quotation marks, on walls. The walls, the buildings were his canvas. And he did this first with small buildings like this one, where he cut a building in two. Why did he cut it? Because he hated life as it was. Why he hated it, I don't know. But I think some of this hate, we have ourselves, if we are to be sincere. You know, and this instability that the cut, the rift into the middle of the building brings into being, it can be rejuvenating. Yes, it destabilizes you, but in the discomfort of this being destabilized, there is the promise of a new beginning. Even Mircea Eliade said, "Brisez le toit de ta maison," break the roof of your building. Why did he say so? Maybe through this rift, through this cut, through this disjunction, the gods sent their messenger to us. Maybe. Are there gods? We don't know. Are there angels? We don't know. But this cut could invite one to dream that there is something else besides our little bourgeois fears and obsessions with comfort and predictability and stability. We are all vulnerable. We will all die. We are born in order to die. So this rift, this cut, is a messenger of that reality we should never forget. Yes, he turned against architecture, but I think deep down he loved architecture. That's why he hated it so much. The frontier between hatred and love is sometimes very thin. And this man appears to have hated architecture, but I actually think he loved it. But he wanted a different kind of architecture. So he began to ruin buildings in order to create something else. I truly think we need more un-architects in the world. Yes, un-architects. Look what he did to the facade of this building. You know, yes, unfortunately, there was some expenditure and some effort implied here. You know, you couldn't do something like this without great effort and, some money being spent. But from a dead building, he created something that at least makes us feel and think in a different way. Look at this. What is here is actually a revulsion, is the reaction against the deadly predictability of a system, Mr. Aravena's system. This man tried to break that system. And yes, in a rather, maybe problematic way, but this is what he tried to do, to break off the system. It's a scream. Yes, it is a scream. Not very different from the scream of that being in that, painting by Munch. It's a scream. It's a scream, but through this scream, I think Gordon Matta-Clark unites us with what is outside of the human being. With I don't want to use bigger words. With what is not us. It's a decentering of anthropos. It's a decentering of the human being. And paradoxically, exactly when the human being is destabilized, is reborn. Here is the young rebellious man. Here he is as a filmmaker. And I think architects should also try to do filmmaking, to do other forms of art. It's important. As Wolf Prick said, if you only think of architecture, you will only do architecture. And maybe that's not enough. Now, of course, here someone is risking his life. He could fall. I mean, these are maybe also amateur builders, maybe his friends, I don't know. But maybe Nietzsche was right, live dangerously. Easy to say, difficult to do. An interesting drawing by him. Again, the split house, Gordon Matta-Clark, cutting into the walls of our predictability, of our little, you see on the left, Louis Kahn, so it seems I forgot about this picture. Louis Kahn on the left, Gordon Matta-Clark on the right. Why is Gordon Matta-Clark ignored in the schools of architecture in general? Not in all of them, but in most of them is. Why? Because he's dangerous. He is dangerous, but he should be known and studied, and we need to reflect on what he tried to do. It's a revolt. He was an homme revolte. It is a revolt. It is a revolt, I would say, against the system, against any systems. He tries to break them. And I wish Aravena will also give up his systems, so-called open systems, which are still systems. Maybe we should use that word, that fatidical word, system, as little as possible, at least for a while. Although I'm aware, even Andrei Tarkovsky, the great Russian filmmaker, well, he was aware that the system can be, can have, you know, malevolent effects, but he still said that maybe some kind of a system is necessary. But at this point, when everything is controlled through systems, I think it is rejuvenating to have, at least from time to time, and in some places, a revolt against the system. Now, let's imagine this facade of this, you know, abandoned building without his intervention. You would say, well, his intervention is not truly, you know, is not truly significant, but is this where Centre Georges Pompidou was built? It looks like it. I guess this is a fragment of the building that existed prior to Centre Georges Pompidou by Renzo Piano and Sir Norman Foster. I see here the structure of Peter Rice. Anyway, this primitive, imperfect roundness that he created here on this facade, it's almost like an adieu that this building that disappeared forever was addressing to society, you know, and as such, it is a moving testimony about what was and isn't any longer. He did also collages with photographs like this. He was a tormented man, but I think we need tormented people in the world. Paradoxically, they might actually save us, and maybe they would also save the trees, those very trees that an enlightened, you know, spoiled architect like Aravena cut down without too much reflection or sorry. I would rather cut down such buildings than to cut down the trees. But you see, through these interventions, these malevolent surgical interventions that Gordon Matta-Clark provoked, a new architectonic reality comes into being. The exterior invades the interior allows itself to be invaded by the exterior, and then different kind of relationship between the two develops. This could have stayed just as it is, and then have Mr. Aravena or another architect, so-called conventional architect, come in and leave exactly the sketch by Gordon Matta-Clark as it was, and just accommodate a certain level of, you know, functionality and even predictability, but leave this as it was, because I think it's very valuable. Now, here is a problem. When you are beginning to design the initial revolt, the result is not as convincing any longer. I don't know if he did this. I like to think that he didn't do this. The domestication, the domesticity. Now to try to I can't find the word, to domesticate that irrational impulse you had to cut down what is predictable and slick and rational and systematic. When it's difficult, it's true. I realize, and now I turn against myself. Maybe it should have been left just as it was, because here I see an attempt to keep suggestions of what he did, and at the same time make it rather pleasant and habitable and so on. It's not the same thing. It doesn't have power. I think it's unconvincing. Well, at least here, the hair, if we are to compare the hair of Aravena with the hair of Gordon matta-clark in this picture, matta-clark is not pretending that this is his hair. It's an artwork. It's a theatrical manipulation, and we should leave it at this. This is the split house. Maybe we should all have in our rooms or somewhere in our house, in our schools even, such a split somewhere, reminding us of what is reminding us of what is uncomfortable, of what is dangerous. And here he is cutting into the ceiling. Who knows what he was actually trying to escape from? It was a troubled family, I would imagine, if his brother, also a young man, committed suicide. And if we consider also he died at 37, just like Vincent van Gogh, I think. And Mozart, I'm not sure, Mozart died at 37 or 35. Anyway, hello, Mr. matta-clark. Rebellious, an architect, but here rather filmmaker. That's it. So in the ruins of matta-clark, the willed ruins of matta-clark, I personally see hope and rejuvenation.